Lisa Selin Davis. Hello.
Hello.
We are going to talk about gender identity. And we've got maybe two questions. One is, what is that thing, gender identity, that everyone keeps talking about all the time and seems really important in the law and to trans people? And then I guess I thought the way to approach this would be I've been digging around for like what seem like promising theories or accounts of gender identity in philosophy and beyond. Two are from philosophy, but one is actually a bit random. And then I guess with a view to thinking about whether once we have an account in hand, we think it's important. What is gender identity and is it important? And I guess because there's this long-standing discussion about the relative place of sex, gender, and gender identity. So that's the thing we're trying to find out. So I thought I might tell you a bit about some of these accounts and see how they land with you. How does that sound all
Sounds
right?
wonderful.
Okay, account number one. I've given these accounts names, the three of them. So the name of account number one, I'm calling Making Gender Identity as Making Sense of Our Experiences. And you might have come across this. This is in a paper by Florence Ashley that came out in the philosophy journal Mind, I think last year or the year before, fairly recently. So here's my best crack at telling you what Ashley's view is. We have gender experiences, and those gender experiences are the building blocks out of which we construct our gender identities. And because our experiences are important and we can have feelings about them, so too is our gender identity. And indeed, okay, he doesn't say it like that, but indeed, this thing that we construct is important as, and I think there are sort of three considerations. It's a core element of the self, and this is going to come up again in one of the other views too, that it tells a person, it tells other people about how to respect us. So once I figure out my gender identity for myself, I communicate that to others through like what pronouns I want, for example. They know how to respect me. And maybe we can like glean some sense of its importance by noticing that when we are misperceived, that gives us a feeling of a sting. He does use that word. So, so does that account make sense? Do you have any questions about any?
Well, I just kept thinking about references that Ashley may be drawing on. I
Yeah.
was thinking about the an early paper, maybe it's not that early. We'll have to look up the date of Zimmerman and West and talking about gender being this thing that's produced and reproduced in
Yep.
interaction. But they're not talking about your identity, they're talking about how you learn how to behave based on your sex.
Yep.
And
Right.
so, which obviously is culturally influenced.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about this being a co-opting that because this is a person who wants to adopt some of those sex-based expectations for the opposite sex.
Yes. That sounds a little bit like the Judith Butler performativity idea. Is that fair?
Yes, it was. I think probably where Judith Butler originally got
Picked
it
it.
from. It
Okay,
predates Butler,
cool.
um,
But
and
oh, go ahead.
the other issue is I was thinking about what it means about how to respect us.
Yes,
That
can we do the the performativity thing first and then go to the
Yes.
normative stuff about why it matters? Because
Yes.
I think what Ashley will want to say just about understanding how we get from the experiences to the identity, I think he'll agree that like some of the gender experiences we go through the world having are this we perform it and we interact with other people and get their feedback. Maybe even that's not that far from what some of the second waivers would want to point to, like we are expected to behave a certain way or we get rewarded for behaving a certain way. But I think the thing that he adds on is all this internal, my inner life about those things. So there's a certain way I feel about it, and there's certain desires that I have, or there's this really long list of quotes that I pulled out of the article, but don't have to hand, which is annoying of me. But there'll be things like, oh, the little sister is pretending to put makeup on his face when he's young and he's feeling cared for. And then he calls that like a gendered experience that he has a very strong positive feeling toward. So I don't know if that changes anything for you, but the thought would be like you add in both the like interactive experience, but also the inner life. And that's all the stuff that goes on the side of your building blocks, gender experiences. And then the question is how you, the individual, construct those blocks into the shape of a thing. And that thing is your gender identity. You build it for yourself.
I mean, it made me think about my own experiences of seeing, like, because I had hippie parents and a hippie mom with hairy armpits and no makeup, and then seeing my dad is a folk musician, and I remember seeing some of the ladies at the swing dances with beautiful like flapper dresses and makeup and being so enamored of that, and then at some point realizing that I was never going to achieve that for a lot of reasons. However, that is the desire part makes sense, and the way and the feelings you get of wanting that or feeling inadequate because you're never going to be that. I mean, I probably have the same feeling as Florence Ashley of seeing these glamorous pretty women and being bummed out because that can never be me.
Yes.
I mean, I also get a lot of medical interventions and that could be me. But what is identity then? If identity is a combination of desires and experiences, like I think I'm confused about
the thing that
what identity is.
Yeah, because the gender identity is the outcome. The gender identity is like the house, and the gender experiences are like the bricks. And everyone can build their bricks into a different shape of house. And that's why it's like deeply personal and deeply idiosyncratic. And it's got a quite strange outcome that two people can have the same gender identity as a result of very different blocks, because you can build different materials into the same shape. And two people can have whatever is the reverse of that.
You can have the same
experiences and different gender identity, and same gender identity and different experiences. So it's all quite movable feast, if that's the right phrase.
Okay, but so with that analogy, identity is still constructed.
Yes.
How can it be authentic if it's constructed via all of these experiences and desires and feelings swirling around together to manifest into a structure? I mean,
yeah, I think he can only
about.
say that it's I guess it's going to be in the ballpark of self-determination or self-creation, because the act of agency in your making sense of your experiences, like your whole cluster of gender experiences, you interpret them in a certain way and you build them into the realization that you are a man category person. And somehow I guess it's that we must think that that act is authoritative. He doesn't actually say that much about this, so I'm sort of filling it in a bit, but I take it because he's really leaning on this idea that you do the interpretive work between your experiences and your identity, that the fact that you have to do that active understanding and decision making is somehow something to do with like your personhood or your agency or your self-determination. And that will then get us to the normative question of like, well, why should we care? Or is this thing important? Because maybe, yeah, people making decisions about how to understand themselves and where they belong, maybe that's a little bit important, or he might say.
Just seem to be so many cultures where there are sex-based expectations, and then there are people who defy them.
Yes.
And there's understanding of those people. And maybe those people aren't always treated well, but in the end, people don't care that much. And it's this ruminating on it, the idea that it's worth your time to think about identity of any kind, but
Yes.
certainly, other than when you're in an individualistic society, yes, you have the privilege of determining your own path to some extent, but we probably have too much of that privilege. And when I hear this, I think that this is indulgent and hedonistic.
Yes.
And I often say, I think gender education for children should be boys and girls can look and act all kinds of ways. And that is, instead of entire curricula about gender and sexuality, that you just repeat that sentence twice a year. And then that's it. So part of me feels like this is the manifestation of just an indulgent society with too much affluence, because people, yeah.
But the thing you're pushing on is are you accepting that it's like an okay view of identity as far as it goes, but then saying like, this is not very important, and indeed it's kind of the wrong values. Like, I don't want to, or is that a fair, like
Yes, I don't think it should be important. I think I can relate to the idea that you have what Ashley calls gendered experiences, that you have experiences in which your sex conflicts with what you are told by your society you should want or be like. And that if we had names and categories for these people, that instead of getting us to go deeper and ask more questions, just checked a box and we were done, like Fa'afafine of Samoa, oh, one of those, fine. That should be, I think, the end of the conversation, not the beginning. There isn't that much to say about it. You realize that you want to wear makeup and dresses. Okay, do whatever you want with that.
I mean, in a way, like his account, it's more pluralistic and so more radical almost than that, because it sounds like what you're talking about that is like there's almost some recognized ways of deviating from the norm, but then no one really cares. So it's like, yeah, okay, you're a bit different and that's fine. I think he's going quite far because he wants to say like, oh, well, maybe I have one like deviant, like atypical or something experience, but then I make a big fuss of that for myself. Like I interpret that into this thing that no other person who had that experience would do. And nonetheless, that's enough for me to have this different categorization and for that to somehow be important. Like now I've got my gender identity and it's woman and I need to be treated all these ways. So yeah, it's not just difference that we could trivialize. It's like, yeah, somehow it does hand over some power to like, it really matters what people make of themselves as individuals, and we should like really care about the results of their thinking about themselves and make sure we
But that's why there was something about respect
Yes.
that you quoted. Can we hear
Yes.
that again?
Yes. So there were three things when I was digging around for what exactly did he say that pointed to the importance of this thing. He says it's a core element of the self. It communicates to others what it means to respect you, which I guess is once I have decided I am a woman and I tell you she, her pronouns, or I'm a woman, then you know how to disrespect me or respect me. Um, and I think the idea that misperception might sting me is something like that's supposed to be evidence that it matters, the fact that it can cause distress once I've reached that decision about what category I belong in, but you don't treat me that way. It causes distress, and that shows that it's somehow important. And the most direct thing he said was, and I don't have the direct quote, I just wrote the summary, but it was that gender identity matters because it is built out of experiences that matter to us. And so almost like the whole normativity of like, why is this thing so important is pushed back onto like, well, because our experiences are important to us. And that's like a pretty weak thing to say, right?
It matters because it matters.
To us. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, maybe. Like, yeah, like some minimal sense that's true. Like, think I might just really like this antique clock for no reason, and that's a reason for you not to destroy it or whatever. But it's not a strong.
Or this is a thing I care about, and so therefore you should care that I care about it.
Mm,
This is where I think we have steered people so wrong, um, which is to expect other people to affirm our own value
yes,
system, our
yes,
personal value system. Because I think about this with teasing. I do not understand teasing. And when someone teases me, which is when they pay a lot of attention to some flaw of mine, I'm very open about my flaws, but one reason I like to be open about them is that I don't want someone to be able to shame me with them. I want to say, I already know. I
yes,
talk too much and too opinionated and whatever it is.
yeah,
But someone teases me about that, I think, but you're basically insulting me. Why is this? I don't understand this. There's a lot. I understand sarcasm. There are a lot of things I understand. I don't understand teasing. So I will perceive that as disrespect.
yeah,
Now, people who
yeah.
played a lot of sports will tell me, "Oh no, that actually is loving."
Yeah, I was
I
just going
can
to say you should not come to Australia. The main form of affection. You'll be like,
maybe I
everyone here is
should.
so disrespectful.
Yeah, but exactly. Or when I went to Israel and it had said in the guidebook, people will be yelling at you, but they're not mad.
Oh,
And when
that's just the impassioned or yeah.
it's just people are, yeah, that's how they're talking. And I got very insulted when the tour guide said that I would fit in there because not everybody was so rude. So
Sorry.
there's a way I want people to treat me. But when they don't treat me that way, it's not necessarily because they're disrespecting me. It very well could be that they have a different idea of what it is to respect someone.
Right.
When we are encouraged to ruminate on identity and to perceive identity as some kind of universal truth, that it's everyone else's job to respect, I think we arrive at this place we're at, where we're teaching children to be fragile, and we have people like Florence Ashley who are making strange, weak arguments about something that is strange and weak, but who have a lot of power.
A
And
lot, yeah. And you would
and
almost expect him to say, like, you want to hear something about why it's important, to elevate it above the sorts of things you're talking about, right? Like you want to, okay, it can't just be that like whoever cares about a thing or has some idiosyncratic view about what they find rude or whatever, that matters merely because it matters to them. That can't be the view. So yeah, I would have hoped for him to say something more about like, why does gender identity matter? Or why does our interpretation of our gendered experiences in particular matter so much? But I couldn't discern anything that would pick it out like that. It did seem to be this general thing you're talking about, where we're just supposed to like really care about each other's things that we and yeah, so it's a good critique, I think, that it's like we need more than that, surely.
Well, the way, here in liberal land where I live, the reason it's important is because of kindness and respect and inclusion.
Yeah,
That's why I always say, why would it be? What about if it's kind to affirm someone's subjective reality? Why do I have to do theirs and they don't have to do mine?
right,
Also, why don't we all have to affirm objective reality?
right,
Which
right.
is, and we can make a lot of strong arguments for why sex matters.
Yep. I think we can make some for why
Included,
gender matters.
right?
And then I think, well, we are going to have to turn to, and in a way, like I've turned to three like scholars that are publishing in very good journals or are at the top of their field, like, and it's been several years now. It's not like it's not new. Like there was a time, I think, like 2018 or 17 or so, where it's like in the philosophy literature there was just one account on offer, and then you have to wait. But it's like by now, like this thing is extremely high stakes in multiple countries, and there are academics who themselves are trans and feel passionately about this and are giving it their best crack. And really, like that's the view. Okay, next. Yeah, so yeah. So maybe
Well,
we should.
if it's I just want to say one more thing about this since I getting to talk to a philosopher because I mentioned that thing about what is identity, but if this is a core element of the self, I just we still have to go back to what is the self and what is a core element and what does it mean to have a core element. I don't know. I mean, my sex is constant, but the way I've looked and behaved in my life is not.
Yes.
So how do we
I wonder, we could actually segue because this is going to be the core question for the next account as well. And I think it's really kind of common between like Ashley saying that about his view and then the next account that I found, it doesn't really fill in the details that well, but it depends so heavily on this claim about identity in the sense of like some very deep fact about the person or the self. So exactly what you've just asked is going to be a great challenge for view number two.
okay.
So look, there's not much to say, but so this view I have mined from Dierdre McCloskey's memoir. And again, so I said these three like Florence, Ashley, okay, maybe not that senior, but Mind is the one in the top 5 philosophy journals, really low acceptance rate. Like getting a paper in Mind is a huge thing. And McCloskey is like a distinguished economist. And okay, most of his work is in economics, but he still has this is a thinking person who has written a careful and reflective book about his experience. And there's just a few things he says in passing where it really seems to be the two crucial things for him are identity in the sense that like to be a woman or to know oneself as a woman is a crucial part of your identity and it's like a matter of identity. I'll say a little more about that. And a matter of freedom. So he is famously a libertarian, I think. So it's like these are the two things that are really pushing the view forward. So when he's pushing the identity line, he's doing it in contrast to the idea that it's a kind of utilitarian decision. He's saying people often ask him why he transitioned, like what's he getting out of it? And he says at several points in the book, it's not about utility. It's not like a decision cost benefit analysis or whatever. It's a matter of identity. And he makes this comparison to being a Midwesterner, or I think the word is being great souled or something, like just having a certain sort of like personality trait that other people like. And again, that's slightly confusing. It's almost like you just come to have a certain sort of personality or set of characteristics, and you know those of yourself. And so what he knows of himself is woman. So that's the sense in which it's like it is identity. And then he sort of comments on the freedom thing. Well, it's not hurting anyone. It's not fraud. The government has no interest in regulating it. It's harmless. So you have no positive reason to interfere with my choices. So that's the sort of two bits that are pushing it along. And the only thing I would add is that if we use those ingredients to say, like, well, McCloskey's type of view of gender identity is it's really a matter of the self and it's an issue of freedom, it's worth noting that he's not anywhere near like a self-ID type view, because he's very focused in the book on joining the tribe of women. So he sort of thinks in terms of taking all these steps, like to pass, because to pass is to be treated as a woman, and the thing that you want is to be treated as a woman. So it's almost like, I don't even know if he would accept talking in terms of gender identity. He might prefer to talk in terms of what it means to be trans, or what it means to have crossed between genders or something like that. But given that our gender identity concept is just like something in the ballpark of this trans stuff, then it seems like worth putting this one on the table too. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's the idea of being treated like a woman and wanting control over your body. Those don't go naturally together. If you want to be treated like a woman, that would actually mean historically having very little control over what happens to your body. So that is a very male idea of being a woman.
Yeah, interesting.
And in the early versions of gender dysphoria, when the first psychiatrists first added gender identity disorder of childhood to the DSM in 1980, actually feminist psychologists and psychiatrists lobbied to have different criteria for boys and girls, because they wanted to make sure that girls weren't just wanting to become boys because of the perceived social advantages.
Yeah.
In that is an assumption that a man who wants to transition to be a woman is that there is something far more pathological about that, and that the bar you need to reach to transition is much lower because you are opting for a decline in status.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about our time right now is that there's this online discourse of about transmaxing, which is these men who perceive that women have social advantages and even physical advantages. I read one account of a male who transitioned and said, well, now the physical tests I have to pass in the army, this maybe explain Trump's ban on trans in the military. But he said, whatever the score I have to achieve as a female is so much lower than the one I have to achieve as a male. And all I have to do is essentially identify as a female. And that is, there's also just a tremendous amount of research now about boys being at a cultural disadvantage. And we essentially have affirmative action for boys, and I think in particular white boys at colleges. That's what, liberal arts schools are desperate for some regular old cishet fellas because colleges are, a lot of them are 65-70% women.
But where does that leave you on thinking, and like in terms of his claim about wanting to change tribes? I mean, do those considerations lead you to think like, well, yeah, there are still kind of differences sufficient that the tribe's language makes sense, even if we oppose them, and so at least you can sort of make sense of the desire, and um again, it maybe then makes the view look okay. Like, yeah, some people just have that as a part of their identity concept for whatever reason, and we are all free to make ourselves or whatever. And then, okay, is that like a fine account of what gender identity or trans status might be? But then what? But then we talk about like, well, whether we really want to support a world with the tribes or the risk of endorsing a minority group as needing tribe belonging, because then that messes up our feminist project. Or I guess again, I'm just saying, are you happy with the account but critical of the how important it is, or are you also critical of the account?
I understand the idea of freedom and self-determination, and the idea that this is some liberatory framework. But because especially if you can't pass, you cannot join the tribe.
Yeah.
Because the tribe itself is heterogeneous, and it is now obvious that there are advantages and disadvantages associated with both tribes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm skeptical of the whole thing. I absolutely understand that people have these desires. And I also understand that many people, there are transsexuals who are a lot happier after they do this to themselves.
Yeah.
Whether they pass or not, whatever their motivations, they exist. The same way people who alter their bodies in all kinds of ways, who are entirely covered in tattoos or get horns in their heads or pierce themselves in a lot of sensitive places, or get a lot of plastic surgery, etc. Like, a lot of these people are happier. And the entire industry of plastic surgery, when it's not, to recover from a wound, which of course is where the industry comes from, but most people get plastic surgery to feel happier. So I get it. I understand it. And a lot of those people are changing their bodies so that they look like what either their idea of beauty or what they perceive to be the cultural standard of beauty. And I understand all of that.
Yeah. Maybe the weird thing about it is that none of those cases, as far as I can think of them, involve you like deceptively entering someone else's freedom of association context. So it's like you maybe get plastic surgery and become more beautiful, and then you somehow get into the halls of beauty and wealth or something. But there's something like distinctive about I want to pass as a woman so that I can enter women only services and go to the women tribe things, and it's up to me like whether I disclose my status or not. I can't think of anything else where it's like that's the project.
I mean, what comes to mind, I doubt anyone has done this, and some people prepare to be offended. How many people are getting nose jobs with cute little button noses, are getting big Semitic noses and going to synagogue or the mosque? How many people are trying to pass as being Jewish or Arab and having a schnoz? I've never heard of that. And I'm incredibly sensitive about this subject, because my grandfather had a small nose
Mhm.
and could pass as non-Jewish,
Mhm.
and his brothers could not. And this is just a huge thing in my family, and then the family I'm married into, which maybe has the opposite. And when the recent films of about famous Jewish musicians, about Bob Dylan and Leonard Bernstein, both the actors wore schnozzes, prosthetic
Yeah,
schnozzes, which
I
I
didn't
had
know
a
that.
lot of feelings about
Yeah.
and did not write anything about. But that would be the kind of equivalent, I think, of you adopt a feature of a group that is disadvantaged because of it,
Yes.
right? You
Yeah.
would make yourself look like a Nazi caricature of a Jew,
Yeah.
and then you could claim to be oppressed or hated or whatever it is. Maybe
Yeah,
Jews.
although maybe this is another, because it's an interesting question about like given how frequently the direction of attempting to change yourself to fit in tracks like status and power rather than oppression or stigma. But I was almost thinking more um some of those the extreme body modification projects or the sort of idiosyncratic personal curation that we find it hard to understand, like you're getting scarification or something, they're not like with a view to then being able to go into this particular community and seem like you were one of them from birth or whatever. Like no one is getting like tanning salon and then pretending to be indigenous and going to the town hall indigenous meetings. Like, and so it's just there's just a weird.
Rachel Dolezal was doing that.
That's true. Yeah, it's like, okay, good. It's very rare outside of trans. And so,
It's very rare. The one place that it might be is similar is with the people who identify as disabled and and get a doctor to remove a limb or blind them, etc.
and
And
then
that
do they then join the
they
communities
do,
of
and
disabled? Okay, then it is similar.
they're with the amputees or in the blind community, because
They are now.
those are also identities, right? There are many deaf people who feel that that there's a deaf culture and resist the technology that would allow them to become hearing people, because they have a clan, they have a tribe, and they want to keep their tribe.
That's actually such an interesting and like I don't even know what to say about that. It's like you've been stigmatized and then you reclaim, you become a proud, like you do a pride movement for your disability or whatever it is, but then it goes so well that it becomes like coveted, like as a sort of like sacred class status or whatever. And then you have people finding it so attractive that they like harm themselves to get entry. I mean, that is like, it's somehow, is that a success of your movement because you really reclaimed it so much that you got status enough to attract outsiders, or is there something going really wrong there?
Well, the kind of deaf culture and community I understand. I understand not wanting to be corrected to be normative when you've got a world that you've created that's adapted. The people who are getting their limbs cut off because they want to be disabled.
Yeah, or I'm thinking someone who like I knew a woman once who said she kept her eyes open in the sunbed because she wanted glasses or whatever. And it's like I'm just thinking, could there be an extreme version of that? You do something that makes you deaf because you just really admire this proud, strong, liberatory. And if a movement gets to that point where its reclamation starts like being attractive to people or people who, we this often hear this about non-binary status, right? It's like it's really bad to just be a white man given the kind of intersectionality hierarchy, and non-binary is the lowest hanging fruit. Like it's very low cost to just, you don't have to change your appearance. So if there starts to be some minority groups where the entry cost is like it is significant, but you could make a pretty good life after that. I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about non-binary as the lowest hanging fruit. I the thing about I'm forgetting the name of this condition or fetish or whatever it is about wanting to be an amputee, but
Oh, I looked that up yesterday, so I should be able to tell you.
Yes, it's like,
Aptomophilia or something.
yes.
Apotemnophilia, something like that.
And of course, it provided this ethical dilemma for
Mm,
the doctors, which we should be comparing this all the time to gender medicine.
yeah.
Because the people there were very it was very difficult to get and very difficult to find a provider. Therefore, I think leaving only the people who were most motivated to do it. But it seems like they're pretty happy and they were pretty desperate before.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's still an ethical dilemma. Even if it makes them happy, it's still, and they were miserable before, it's still, brings up the question of do no harm. I mean, are you harming someone if you're leaving them to be psychologically tortured? Or are you harming someone by making them into a disabled person, but one who is happy and satisfied?
Right. And that is going to depend on what we think about the status of the desire, right? Because if we really think it is like pathological in some sense, we'll be more inclined to treat that as a psychiatric, like suffering of the kind that it's appropriate for medicine to intervene on. And if we think it's just a peculiar desire, then that should be right out in the like commercial plastic surgery and possibly regulated and illegal world. Like that's just not medicine's business. And I guess that is the same thing going on with trans medicine at the moment. Like, is creative embodiment goals sounds a lot like a plastic surgery project, not a medicine project. And so there somehow needs to settle like what is the status of the desire of the person that is really saying that they need this or want this or yeah. Can I run a little there's one little like I don't know if it's quite a thought experiment, but a case that I found in another paper that I tried to add on to the McCloskey view to make it more persuasive. Can I run that by you?
Mm-hmm.
So, um, well, so there's one person, Laura Valentini has this paper, and the main idea there is that we should be able to reveal to other people like who we truly are for their appraisal. And so it seems like you could add that idea in. Actually, now I'm borrowing from a third source. Catherine Jenkins has this case where a trans woman wants to appear like conservative and respectful at a public occasion, and so wears like a modest dress. But of course, the public think that that's a man being like an attention seeker and a provocateur because he's shown up wearing a dress. And this is, I guess, supposed to be a good case of like who you really are is respectful and appropriate, but you're like not able to show the world who you truly are. And the reason I thought that had some relevance to helping McCloskey with his claims was that I guess he could say that he has a bundle of traits such that if he were appraised as a woman, that he would be positively appraised, like people would admire him and think he's a very good woman. But if those were men's traits, he would seem like a shitty, like beta male, whatever. And so I don't know if this is just going a bit far, but I was like, does that at least help get the argument towards like he has an identity interest in being a woman, but it's wrong not to treat him as a woman. Like it makes it important. It's wrong for us not to treat him as a woman because we should be responding to the characteristics he really has, which are he's a modest, kind, caring woman, not a sissy man or whatever. um, this might be a bit desperate on my
And if
part,
you
but I was
wear like a shift dress or something, then you get different status than if you're wearing a leather miniskirt.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Actually, that reminds me of once when I interviewed Blanchard about autogynephilia, which is when apparently most trans women, but I guess we have no way of knowing, who have this somewhat sexual desire to be a woman.
Yeah.
Whatever that means. And it can range from wearing women's clothes to having, all the surgeries and lots of things in between. And many men, when they transition, Blanchard told me they first start out kind of dressing like maybe a teenage hooker, we'd call it, that line.
I know the look. Yeah.
Club wear, and they take pictures of themselves in their like lacy underwear and leather mini skirt.
Yeah.
And there was an autogynephilic parent at my kid's school who we were expected to call. She a big giant guy. And he was the only person picking up children in a teeny tiny hot pink mini skirt. There was not a mom in the schoolyard dressed anything like that. So it's certainly
supposed to be they're going through their own puberty or whatever, like because they're newly. Is that the theory?
I think it takes them a while to settle in, and maybe they're overcompensating. But and some of it is that they're dressing as a sex object. They're dressing as what they would be attracted to.
Yeah.
Them, so yeah, frumpy middle-aged mom is not what people are transitioning to. That's not the ideal. It's weird. So weird.
It's so embarrassing. I don't know, maybe it's not the humane response, but something about the whole, just watching that all play out, it's so embarrassing. And then it's all, because it's not reflective, right? They have no idea that everyone else is seeing it that way. So it's yeah, somehow I find it absolutely excruciating.
And I also saw him at the beach in his thong and mesh cover up. And I was like, I'm in we're just covering as much as my body as possible as it expands and resettles in middle age. But, and you know what? I envy that. I would love to not care and just be flaunting everything. But again, I don't care that someone wants to do that. I really, truly don't. I know that those people exist. I know some autogynephiles. I know happy transsexuals. And I actually, I am not actually a TERF because I'm actually quite inclusive. And I believe so firmly in Nina Paley's quote, "Sex is real, people are weird." That really is my North Star. But I don't want to call that man in the pink mini skirt in the schoolyard a woman.
Yeah.
So again, I can follow these claims about gender identity, even though I don't seem to be buying most of them, because I have too many questions about what does it mean to be treated like a woman? Yeah. What is the self? What is identity? I get that you believe that. I also was raised as a very, very strict atheist in America and for a few years in the South in my childhood. So I was used to a whole bunch of people believe things that my family does not believe.
Yeah.
And in fact, I had a single mom and I was just different. I was a hippie kid. I was just very different from everyone else. So I got used to that. But in this Laura Valentini claim, this person is talking about who we truly are and revealing our true selves. Mm. Now, I've spent my whole life trying not to reveal my true self because I lose all my power. My true self is out on display all the time. I have very little self-control, and it has made my life hard. Mm-hmm. And when I used to go to yoga and they tell you to chant Sat Nam, which means something like my true self. And I would think like, I don't want that. I don't want her. I want actually to learn to keep my cards close to my chest, and I want to give you the public. I want there to be a separation between the public and private parts, which is not, despite my at this point, 5 decades of life, I don't have those skills still. And but I would like to. There's a me I would like to be, my authentic self.
It's interesting because she does say when you're acting non-deceptively in public view, you're disempowered if you're not like, if you can't communicate that. And so the trans person would be disempowered if he was being appropriate and modest on this occasion, but everyone was thinking he's a troublemaker. I don't know if it's part of her view that you can't choose to deliberately not reveal certain aspects of yourself to a public. I can't remember if she talks about that. I don't see why she couldn't just say, you use your judgment about what you keep private and what you want to even put forward to a public. And maybe she wouldn't even need to be tied to any authenticity claim. Maybe she would say, we can cultivate being hilarious or whatever. Like we can just cultivate the thing that we want to be, but still, when we're ready, we want to be able to show that to other people and have them like accurately track it and respond to it. She has some comment like, what is even the point of trying to be kind and a good citizen or whatever if we're just going to be completely misinterpreted or misunderstood all the time anyway? So I sort of get the impulse of that, but then for me, the question would be like, even when you apply it to the trans case, it does seem to depend on this idea that like we should appraise people qua woman or qua man, like that someone could be a good woman but a bad man. Or, and I think as a feminist, I hate that idea. So I feel very like a lot of resistance to the thought that Dierdre McCloskey might be a bad man but a good woman, and that's some reason for me to treat him as a woman. It's like, no, Dierdre should join the feminists rather than the feminists should treat Dierdre as a woman.
I mean, I am a bad woman, but I would be a bad man too. So I guess my true self is bad. I just
And you don't want to be accurately appraised because then everyone would dislike you. Is that the claim?
I don't want to be accurately. I mean, but on the other hand, I don't like being inaccurately appraised. I don't like when someone writes that I'm a TERF,
Right.
because I don't call myself that. I
Right.
don't even call myself gender critical. I am not a tribe joiner.
Yeah.
I am not. I am in the sex class of women. That is not a tribe I can join or reject.
Good,
But
but does that feeling make you sympathetic to the man who just knows that he is not an infiltrator of the lesbian cultural event? Rather, he himself is a lesbian, and all he
I
wants to do is go along and show support to his fellow lesbians. He's constantly being misrepresented in the press.
well, that is a tribe I did really want to join. I will
Yeah.
say from a very young age. I think I told you that story about being 5 years old. Maybe I didn't. I moved to Georgia when I was 4.5 or 5, which is a southern, conservative southern state. And it took me a long time to make friends. And then the first friend I made when my mom picked me up, and my mom had very short hair and was a single mom
Yeah.
with the hairy armpits. And I said, they asked if we had fun. And I said, when I grow up, I want to be gay and marry Kelly. And then I never had any friends actually in Georgia. So
You got stigmatized as a gay at age 5.
That's why. But I did want to join that group, and that was kind of, but I didn't. I couldn't. You can't. Guess what? You can't make yourself gay any more than you can make yourself straight, apparently.
So you're thinking there are just some limits, and I actually think Valentini would agree with that. There are some sorts of character traits that we can cultivate and that are within our control. And then she's probably right that we should be able to show them to people and have them admire us or disdain us or whatever. But being a lesbian or being a woman, they're just not in that cluster. And so that view is not going to help McCloskey make his claims any more persuasive.
Well, I'm understanding the pain of being misread. Although the difficult thing about transsexualism is that you're not being misread, right? So I think if someone characterizes me as a TERF or as a transphobe, they are misreading me because that's not, I don't identify that way and I don't think of myself that way. But who's to say? Who's right about that? About whether or not I'm a transphobe? Are the people who interpret me that way right? Or am I right because I know what I believe? And how much is that like gender identity?
Are you saying like because it just looks more a matter of interpretation or it's relative to each side's values about what counts as good and bad behavior? But that's unlike gender identity because that's more of a truth claim or a
Well, I mean, maybe the emotions are the same, and that a lot of these arguments are about emotions. I mean, sometimes you hear the arguments about, brain patterns, but that generally there does not seem to be a real biological component. So it's about emotions and desires, and those are real. And how much we accommodate people based on those things, that's a real question. But I guess if someone wants to be correctly read as having this gender identity, and I could be okay with that. In fact, in a way, I think that's what the category of transsexualism could and should be, like Buck Angel, who says, I'm not a man. I know I'm female, but I'm occupying this space. I am okay with that. The same way that I would say, I am not a TERF or a transphobe or gender critical. However you identify me, that's not how I identify myself. You have a set of values. I want to make room for these liminal spaces, but I don't exactly see how to. I think the problem is when we talk about achieving authenticity, right? Like that isn't something that you achieve because authenticity would just exist. And so sex is authentic. And when you veer away from it, when you have medical interventions, you are creating an inauthentic self that feels authentic. Well, that's very, very interesting. The dissonance of that, the quandary of that. I could be interested in that, but there's a big difference between that very strange kind of existence of achieving authenticity through inauthenticity and saying that that's important, which is the second part. Saying that we should adjust law and policy to accommodate that.
But I think they would just, like someone like McCloskey would just resist that description, right? Like he'll just say, yeah, you're not, sex is not or sex is authentic, but so is this psychological sense of how I want to make myself, or so is my exercise of my freedom or whatever. And now I'm just like prioritizing the authenticity of who I really am or something, and I'm getting my body to get me what I really ultimately want. And then I just don't, because it's like if the criticism of how the law should be changed depends on what we designate as inauthentic, it's just going to be like we just disagree between the two camps about which things are authentic, right? Although I do think they still, to argue that their gender identity is authentic, they do owe us some good account of what that is, which we are trying to find.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, they have these accounts, and inside the accounts are things that many of us can relate to, which are our feelings about our sex and our. I just think in Western society we've put so much emphasis on these feelings, and I just don't think it's healthy. And I think so much of being, so I've heard, a mature adult is actually getting ahead of your feelings and making decisions about how to behave. Some people have this ability. I have not cultivated this myself. This is despite trying very hard and all kinds of interventions. I don't want to live in a world in which people interpret feelings as facts.
Yeah.
This is a bad idea. And this is a Western individualistic idea.
Yeah.
That's obviously a value judgment, but that's where, based on not only my personal struggles, but what I see around me, which is that kids adopt a gender identity and are told that the minute they have a gender identity that is distinguished somehow from their sex, that they are vulnerable, that the world hates them, right? There's so much that comes with this. And it manifests in a new reality, and it's not a very good reality. So we have sort of made feelings into facts, not just in law and policy, but by creating an atmosphere around a trans identity.
I do wonder, though, if we are slightly backing down and if these more recent accounts are a good example of that. It's like, because the trans activists were earlier on trying for the fact, right? It's like, oh, it's the brain sex, or it's the something went wrong hormonally in the womb, or like whatever the theories. That's just a gay one, actually. I don't even know if they've tried that, but various theories where like I really am this thing, and there's going to be a scientific explanation for it. The things like Florence Ashley's more recent work, or Andrea Long Chu's piece in the New Yorker or whatever, these are kind of more, no, like it is actually, after all, just a feeling, but it's just a strong feeling, like we want this thing. And McCloskey's account, in a way, is like it's sort of admirable, because he is saying, I just want to join the tribe. Like I want, it's a desire or an aspiration. It's not a, he sort of does veer toward it's a fact, like I know who I am. But I wonder if that's like a positive thing, that they've run out of steam on the claiming it to be a fact, and now they're sort of having to admit that it's a feeling, and they'll just try to say that the feeling is important, and then that won't work after a while. And so everything will sort of, like, that's a bit hopeful in a way.
Well, Andrea Long Chu wrote "Sissy Porn Made Me Trans."
Yeah.
I think, and also wrote a piece in the New York Times with the title, "My New Vagina Won't Make Me Happy."
But I want it anyway, right? Something like that
But I
is the
want it
punchline.
anyway.
Exactly. But that's admitting it's a desire. And that is, maybe
I mean,
that's a step forward.
it could be a step forward, or it could be that we've just gotten to the point where so much is normalized that they're saying the quiet part out loud, and they are so protected because they've said we're so vulnerable and we'll kill ourselves if we don't get what we want,
Right.
that nobody, it's just evidence of having more and more power. It's like a cult, right? I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not just throwing out all the whole trans thing is a cult. I'm saying the way cults work is they start, you go to a Scientology class. It's incredibly helpful and reasonable. It gives you these tools, or the Nixium. You do this self-accounting. You learn a lot of useful stuff to help you navigate. And then the stakes get raised and raised and raised. The claims get wilder and wilder until you find yourself completely subjugating yourself and doing these crazy things and having sex with the leader and, sleeping on a bed of nails and branding yourself in the NXIVM cult. And it's the slow boiling frog. So I guess one way of interpreting Andrea Long Chu, going from, there's this authentic thing that reveals itself and must be affirmed, to actually, I just watched a lot of sissy porn and I really do get off by putting a used maxi pad in my underpants, that is the boiled frog.
Yes. Okay, I see. No, that's a fair counterpoint, and I don't know which is more realistic. I see we're already taking way too long, so should we quickly do the third one?
Okay. That was only the second one?
It was only the second, but I don't think there's much. I think we've sort of covered most of the objections as it is. Have you got like another 5-ish minutes or?
Yes.
Okay. So this,
my brain.
I just wanted to mention this one because it is the most recent one as far as I'm aware. And it's philosophy, again, another trans woman. And so here's the account. To have a gender identity is to take it to be fitting or not take it to be unfitting for others to treat you as a man or a woman or genderqueer or non-binary or whatever. And I don't have many caveats to add to that because that's literally the whole account. But there is one little bit of discussion where he is like, he says like, not just any judgment about how it is fitting for someone to treat me counts and is meriting of respect. You could be an aristocrat and think that it is appropriate for others to be obsequious toward you, and that would be bad because it contributes to social hierarchy. So no to the aristocrat, but yes to men who think it's fitting for them to be treated as women. And
I identify as an aristocrat and then have other people have to affirm that by buying me a brownstone.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? So again, there's a sort of unspoken like gender identity is special or exceptional, but I'm not really going to argue why, right? And actually, it's all of the papers. There's some other ones we haven't talked about that are like more focused on the agency aspect of like saying who you are. But they always do this. They'll be like, oh, not, of course not for malicious identities like racists or transracialists or whatever. And they'll get so close to the structure of the trans case, but then they'll just act like it's so obvious that that's not a bad one. Like, so this I guess has that flavor where it's like, oh, obviously not the aristocrat, but like for sure the man. What else is there to say about that? Oh, just one other thing is that he does sort of slip in like, well, this thing is important because when we make judgments about what is fitting or not fitting, those things, those normative judgments merit respect. Just claims that. And maybe that's true. Like sometimes
normative judgments didn't merit respect. I thought that was what the kids were saying. Wait, will you read it one more time?
To have a gender identity is to take it to be fitting or not take it to be unfitting for others to treat you as a man or a woman or whatever. So I guess for the trans woman, for a male, if he has a woman gender identity, if he takes it to be fitting for others to treat him as a woman. And because he's made a judgment about how it is fitting for others to treat him, that is a normative judgment, and these kinds of judgments merit respect. So again, it's about as weak as Florence Ashley's, right? It's like, this is how I've made sense of my experiences, and that's important because I made sense of my experiences. Okay, you did a thing, good for you.
If this term does not exist, then I'm coining it now, which is post-individualism. Because
talk me through the
post-individualism, because it's one thing to be so individualistic that you have this idiosyncratic sense of self that because you live in a society where you're allowed to ruminate on identity endlessly, and because We don't have uniform tribes anymore, kind of other than male and female, because there's decline in religion and, global migration, etc. The remaining constants basically are male and female, because everything else is kind of a big melange. So now we've gone from, I can be anything I want, to whatever I am, everyone else has to participate in it. So it's just beyond, it's like reverse individualism or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the where we get stuck is that the identity is about what is fitting for others, how other
To do
people
to you. Yeah.
yeah
True.
which is not the thing that we're supposed to be trying to control, unless we're
Good.
communists or
Good.
religious leaders. And I've often said, that this is, I kind of reject the cult idea, because a cult has a charismatic leader. What I think about the belief system of gender identity is that it makes each person a cult leader, and that they see everyone else as theirs to control.
Mm. Okay, good. No, I like that objection, and I hadn't thought of that way of sort of like, surely the focus should be on being the sort of person such that others will respond to you in a certain way. Like if you want a certain sort of treatment, be the kind of person that would merit that treatment. Don't like.
I had this thought today about seeing someone who I'd never met in person and thinking, oh, the last time I was in that city, I weighed 10 pounds less. And that I doubt the guy would meet me and say, she's nice to meet her. She's a little chubbier than I thought. Although I do think that probably we respect, I am not heavy, but like we respect thin people more than,
Yeah.
and then at least in among white people.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, I should just act like I'm completely comfortable with my body.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the absolute best thing I can do. I cannot make demands that another person treat me as if I still wear size 4. So, and I don't know, and what would that be? I would want to get into that person's head and say, and have that person be thinking, oh, I met Lisa and she's thin. Like, if I have no control over that, I can project confidence whether I have it or not. And that's when I go back to, I don't want to be my authentic self, because my authentic self is ruminating about my appearance and feeling bad.
Yeah.
I want to be confident.
It's interestingly, it makes me think I watch this Married at First Sight every year. Like, I know I shouldn't, but I do. It's like very trashy, but a lot of Australians watch it. It's very fun watching the commentary. The reason I mention it is that there's a lot of harping.
What?
Is harping a fair word? Like where one partner wants the other partner. It's exactly this dynamic. Like they try to get that one to be more like giving them compliments all the time, or like telling them they're really beautiful and like the most beautiful person in the room. And like it's not an unfamiliar dynamic that the partners will be really trying to control each other, like, and turn each other into the sort of person who treats them the way they've always dreamed of a partner treating them. And there'll just be these real people coming up against that one's expectations. And so, yeah, that's a really nice illustration, I think, of the like, no, that what a hopeless project. Just be the sort of person. And then I guess if some people don't treat you as you think you should be treated or want to be treated, even though you're like putting everything right out into the world, move along to someone new. Like it's just
wear the modest dress or wear the flowery dress
And suck it
and,
up on how people
and
react.
don't, I mean, on the one hand, I was gonna say don't care how other people react. Well, of course we care somewhat
Yeah.
because we are herd animals and because community is central to human flourishing. And we want to be sensitive to upsetting a lot of people. I mean, I upset people every morning at my exercise class because I just talk about, I was going to say about, you know, I understand that hiding parts of yourself is painful. So if you're, gay and everyone is assuming everywhere you go that you're straight and it's disconcerting and you feel like by not sharing this, people keep making these assumptions. I mean, this is for so many of my friends, who were more feminine. This was an issue of like kind of constantly having to come out because people assumed they were straight. Mm-hmm. And for me, people are assuming that I agree with them on every single thing about politics. And so every morning I'm out in the park exercising and I'm saying, God, the ACLU is a repressive organization that's trying to cancel my event in Boston on Sunday, and they're just, and then these crazy advocacy groups are trying to get rid of the school board members and everyone around me that they want to get rid of those school board members that I support.
Yeah.
And I'm coming out as heterodox constantly and I'm ruining everybody's exercise class.
Yeah.
So once again, why should I be I don't know if these are useful analogies. I am very interested in understanding the claims, but I don't want to be a person with no compassion for these people. Yeah. I do believe, and especially after listening to all these definitions that you offered, that gender identity is a private experience. If it is a real thing, which I'm not convinced it is beyond the Lawrence Kohlberg definition of a sort of preschooler's cognitive phase in which they understand that there are two sexes.
Yeah.
And that they are in one or the other, and they base that understanding on stereotypes, and that children who are naturally gender nonconforming might assume until they arrive at the next cognitive phase of gender constancy that they belong to the opposite sex. I'm not convinced that any of these definitions you've offered are real, useful, valuable, or worthy of embedding in policy or law.
Yeah.
But I am convinced that there are people who understand themselves this way. And I do actually want to make room for them because they are here. Mm-hmm. Whether I like
it is it's a humane note to end on, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not my authentic self. That's the me I want to be.
That's good because I was finding her a little bit annoying. So I will recommend, just for anyone watching who's interested, there's a paper by Anca Gheaus that we might have talked about had we had time, but we didn't. But I'll list it in the description. She goes through, like, I think it's 5 or 6 criteria, 5 criteria that a account of gender identity would have to meet to do the job that trans activists want it to do. And then she goes through 6 different accounts than we have discussed of gender identity and shows that all 6 fail to meet all the criteria. And so that's quite useful. It's like a pretty skeptical note to end on, in the sense of like, probably we're not going to, it's not like it's just not these 3 accounts and it wasn't the last 2, but it will be the next one. More likely there just is no definition coming that can do the work that the activists have sort of put it to. And she has a skeptical, she comes to a view about what that means for feminism. Like, we can go ahead with the abolition of gender norms without needing recourse to this concept. But of course, that's not going to be helpful to trans activists who really need that concept to keep justifying their activism. So if anyone's curious, check that paper out. And Lisa, thank you very much. It's been fun.